All right, guys, it's a gorgeous Monday morning here in Laguna Hills. I got my coffee. I'm excited to share with you guys a very special deal that I referenced in one of my other videos. This was the big deal this year that I closed, and the buyer was a very high-profile guy. His name is Manny Khoshbin. I know you guys have probably seen him on Instagram. He is a commercial real estate investor and educator, and also has an insane exotic car collection, one that I've personally been able to see as he gave me a tour of his office building here in Orange County. But again, I want to talk to you guys about this deal, break it down from how it even happened. Again, my story of meeting Manny and him inspiring my journey back in 2015. Fast forward all these years in 2022, and I get to sell this guy a building here in Orange County, negotiate with him, go through the entire deal process, and make it happen. So let's go ahead and break down what happened this year, the building in question, and I'll kind of walk through what worked for me, representing my client, the seller, and also working with Manny since he was a principal in this transaction, and how I kind of operated throughout this deal to assist him as well. The building is 23161 Mill Creek Drive. It is a 3-story building here in Laguna Hills. The story behind this asset was it was one of 6 buildings that my client acquired back in 2019 as part of a package portfolio. So of all the 6 buildings, I would say this one probably had the toughest time getting leasing, especially even after the seller had poured in capital and made substantial improvements, lobby renovations, upgrading corridors and restrooms, enhancing the exterior, kind of also addressing some of the lingering HVAC issues from the previous owner as well. So in 2021, the seller had tried to list this building for sale twice unsuccessfully. Then myself and one of my other partners, we were, of course, the leasing brokers. We were basically given an opportunity to basically list this building for sale or for lease. For sale, we either get an interested buyer to give us our target number, or we just continue with our business model and try to get it leased up. Because at that point, it was close to about being only 40% occupied, 60% vacant. So at that point, this would be something that would be considered a distressed asset. Now, the story and the connection behind Manny and how it all transpired around February of this year was really interesting. And it was one of those things where, I'd followed Manny for many, many years. I know that he was the type of buyer to really go after distressed properties. He's the type of buyer to really look at an opportunity and see, hey, can I take advantage and get some competitive pricing or buy something at a discounted acquisition? So 23161 Mill Creek Drive, again, just to recap, it's a 3-story building, roughly about 48,000 square feet in total. The price we were going out and floating it to prospective buyers was around $11 million. We were really going out there, myself included, really hustling and trying to see if we could get somebody to approach that number as reasonable as possible. The way that has all happened is here in the brokerage community, it's pretty tight knit. So we kind of have an understanding of not only all the brokers, we all have a pretty good understanding of who the major buyers in this market are. So I've seen Manny's blast through a platform we use. It's called CoStar, the biggest broker to broker platform in commercial real estate, which I'll talk about in another video. I've seen Manny's email blasts from time to time over the months / few years. We were, my client had previously tried to list this through an alternative method through a platform called 10X Commercial. We struck out twice. So that's why we went the for sale for lease route. 2022 just started. I think for me as a broker, I was looking at 2021, really recapping the successes. Yes, we were all, right, as a whole, still dealing with a lot of restrictions. But 2022, I wanted it to be different. I wanted to start deals, not only on the leasing side, but on the sales side, to definitely start off on a different tone. I just remember that night, it was February 22nd. I was laying in bed and I was like, let me go ahead and just shoot this over to Manny and see what he would think. And when I say shoot this over, we actually have a pretty detailed OM. So an OM stands for offering memorandum. And for those of you who are new to commercial real estate, basically anytime you are listing an office building for sale or any commercial property for sale, you have some sort of a detailed offering memorandum about the opportunity. It gives a pretty detailed breakdown about all the assets, characteristics, how many stories it is, how many acres, what year it was built, when it was renovated, can provide in certain instances brief rent roll. Something detailed usually happens once you're under contract after a PSA or a purchase sale agreement has been executed. So it was just one of those things, guys, and this is another theme that I want you to get out from this video, is just to go for it. That night, I was like, okay, it's been a few months. My client is obviously looking to get rid of this asset, and my thought was, hey, just go for it. And he could possibly not respond. If he doesn't respond, it's okay. You just keep moving forward. But that morning, February 23rd this year, I sent Manny the brochure. I sent him a very nice email, and I said, hey, Manny, hope all is well. I wanted to send you this OM about 23161 Mill Creek Drive. And I basically said, hey, we tried listing it twice. Nothing really happened. It is still available for sale or for lease. Here's our target number. Then he responded within a few hours. Basically at that point, signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and we provided him a few more details about the asset. So anytime an interested buyer reaches out and has expressed somewhat of strong interest, sellers can require them to at least sign an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement so that they can review some more detailed information about the asset. And the understanding is, hey, if they don't move forward on it, they're going to keep everything confidential and just go their separate ways. After Manny receives the NDA, I shoot over a rent roll, and I think I also provided him deeper insight into what we had done as an ownership since we owned it. So then Manny responds, and he says, hey, Robin, I would like to request a formal building tour the following day. So 23rd, I send him the OM, get a response, he signs the NDA, reviews the material, then reaches out and says, hey, let's go ahead on the 24th of February, go ahead and schedule a formal tour. Now, guys, one thing about me you'll learn is I love what I do. I do love the art of selling. Hope I can teach you guys some of the techniques that I employ anytime I have important clients in front of me when they are touring these assets. But I knew that at that point, hey, you now have an opportunity. Manny and his analysts are going to join you. Give them a great breakdown of this asset and how it could be of a benefit to him, right? Because in this case, yes, I need to help my client, the seller, get rid of the asset or execute a disposition, but I also want Manny as the buyer to really understand what the value could be in him buying this asset. I give him a great tour. I meet him, and he greets me and he says, hey, you look familiar. Where have I met you? And I'm going to put up some photos. I actually ran into Manny at a USC alumni event in Newport Beach. It was hosted at Lamborghini Newport Beach, and it was an alumni event, and he was there. Guys, I literally went up to him, and I shook his hand, and I said, hey, Manny, thank you so much. You're a true inspiration. And that was, I want to say, in 2017. And it was so funny because at that point, of course, he didn't know who I was. And here you fast forward like 5 years later, I'm here now, all of a sudden giving him a building tour to try and sell him a building. That was the 24th. It was really cool. At that point, it's like he's still just a prospective buyer. You've given him a great rundown, a formal tour now has been done. At that point, hey, he could have still walked away. Maybe I could have gotten some feedback in a few days like, Robin, it's really not a good fit for me. I'm gonna pass. But here's a photo of me right after the tour, because it'd been a few years since I had seen him after that Lamborghini event. So I completed the tour and I was definitely in deal-making mode. And then right after I was like, hey, Manny, I'd love to grab a pic with you real quick. And we took it in the lobby of Mill Creek. Fast forward to March 2nd. Manny then reaches back out to me, and again, he's the principal in this transaction, so I'm the seller's representative broker, but in this case, since both parties have an understanding of how I'm operating in this transaction, Manny requests my help in writing a letter of intent to purchase this building with his terms. That's what I did. I helped Manny craft up the LOI. The LOI was actually in a template that the seller uses, so that would have made things a little bit easier. So I helped write Manny's LOI, and he wants to come in at a price of 10.5 million. So just as a recap, we were listing this building for 11 million. He wants to come in at 10.5. So that was March 2nd. March 3rd, the LOI is executed by Manny and then presented to the seller. So again, I want to fast forward a little bit here. My client essentially agreed to the 10.5 number, but it was pretty important for my client to have Manny really commit to a target closing date because we were trying to refinance a portfolio. So the seller had goals, and the incentive was, hey, we will give you, we'll agree to the price, but we need you, the buyer, to then meet those target deadlines. So that's going to be the biggest challenge in this deal. Is it's an art. And what I've learned as a broker, you have to really be good at navigating the goals of both parties and finding solutions to help achieve all the objectives from both sides as closely as possible. Another upside in this deal was getting financing was not necessarily a contingency, but to get financing with very tight timelines of a deal of this magnitude can be very much a challenge, and Manny definitely echoed that. March 7th, we go ahead and then give Manny an access agreement. So this, again, solely, for the audience that's kind of newer to commercial real estate, an access agreement, if it's executed, allows the buyer to get rolling on due diligence quickly and access to the property info quickly as well. Because everything was kind of moving fast-paced, had some tight timelines to hit. We were also trying to get and work through a PSA. So we executed the access agreement March 7th. Then the goal was to work through a purchase sale agreement as quickly as possible. So again, just to recap, LOI gets executed normally, then you go to a PSA. And again, depending on that, it can take a week or two. Once our attorneys are involved, red lines. Again, these are very important legal binding documents, right, that set the tone for how the rest of the transaction is going to go. So you want to make sure it's done correctly. Both sides are happy once we officially get under contract. 2 weeks of going back and forth on the PSA, tough negotiations, Manny's attorney saying, hey, my guys are redlining everything, saying no, no, no. And I have to assuage Manny and say, hey, look, I think we can find a happy medium here to get you the time you need to successfully complete your due diligence and close on this property, but also in a way where, hey, my client can exit out of this property and go on about with their goals. Again, March 7th was when the access agreement was executed, but we didn't fully execute the purchase sale agreement until March 24th. After the PSA was fully executed, that was a really great day for me because, again, it was another important step in this deal from, just going for it and shooting the opportunity to Manny to see if he'd bite. For now, PSA is executed. We are now officially under contract. The day after, March 25th, we'd gone ahead and scheduled the tenant interview. So anytime a buyer is buying an office building, they then have the opportunity to complete some tenant interviews, and they'll normally ask questions like, hey, are you paying your rent? What would you like to see from me, the new buyer / new incoming owner? What would you like to see in terms of improvements? How's your experience been? So basically the tenant interview is just a process for the buyer to interview all the existing tenants within an office building or commercial property, confirm and conduct their due diligence to give them either peace of mind about them continuing to move forward with the transaction, or it could raise some important red flags for them as they're nearing the end of the DD date to be like, okay, after I've completed my due diligence and these red flags arose from my tenant interviews, I don't want to move forward with a sale. So tenant interviews in an office building sale are very important. We move through this pretty quickly. Now, again, in this instance, Mill Creek, it was a 40% occupied building and roughly, I want to say, 8 tenants in total. So like a high-rise tower where you have 20 tenants, tenant reviews could have taken a little bit longer. Here it was much more easily manageable for the buyer. DD begins. 45 days due diligence, and at that point, Manny's going to go ahead and order some inspection reports, right? So that a few weeks go by there. And then as DD's going on, I felt, let me sit down and chat with Manny about his goals. So I took Manny to dinner, and here's a photo of me and him at Mastro's, which was awesome, right? To have a one-on-one with a guy like that is truly valuable, where I could not only talk about this asset and the value it could add to him, but it was also cool to get inside the mind of Manny and how he thinks when he goes about buying assets. And I think one of the really cool things about that dinner was being able to not only talk to Manny as a broker, but also be able to talk to Manny as a landlord. And again, kind of highlight to him that, hey, Manny, you were kind of a catalyst in my journey. And, you know, you like to buy distressed office assets. I like single tenant industrial outside of California. So that was also pretty cool as well. And again, all guys, as a recap of just going for it. So fast forward a few weeks, then what ends up happening is the due diligence does get extended to April 24th. So April 13th, I take Manny to dinner, and DD officially kind of begun March 25th. So you have about 45 days. Manny then comes back to us and the seller and says, hey, I need an extension on the due diligence. Then Manny submits his due diligence officially on April 20th. So he requests an extension up to the 24th, but by the 20th, he's completed his due diligence. And at that point, that's a very important step in an office sale. So the buyer can either choose to move forward, highlight some concerns, or notify the seller, hey, I would like to, cancel escrow and not move forward. So after Manny completes his due diligence, he comes back to my client and asks essentially for $500,000 off the sales price due to some discrepancies he noted in his analysis. So very tense situation, right? At that point, the deal could have blown up. Seller would not have been happy. Manny kind of had a very take it or leave it approach with the intent to just get this deal done. My client agrees, no, it's not going to be a $500,000 reduction in the sales price, but what we will do is we'll reduce the price by $100,000. So 11 million was the asking, 10.5 million was what Manny agreed to come in at, and my client agreed to reduce it to 10.4. So I have to go to Manny now during this day and say, hey Manny, look, we're not going to be able to get you a $500,000 reduction. 10.4 is your number. 10.4 is still a steal of a deal. And guys, when I get to the end of this video, 10.4 million, that was $213 a square foot. So just for reference, office in Orange County, at least for 2022, has been trading roughly in the $200 per square foot range. So really a steal of a deal for Manny. At that point, after the DD is done, this is what you would call a retrade. Not really something in our world that's looked highly upon, but it does happen. And the good news here is we were able to seek a solution, which Manny ended up moving forward with at a 10.4, and my client ended up moving forward with at a 10.4. So April 21st, we agree to the price adjustment, we execute it via an amendment, and then Manny officially goes hard. When the buyer goes hard, that means their money is now non-refundable. They go through with the purchase. And then to fast forward this deal, guys, we officially closed May 24th. The deal was done, and I ended up selling Manny a $10.4 million building. So guys, hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture of how that deal specifically went, some timelines. And again, it was very interesting because the story was so many years ago. I was just thinking about real estate. One of my buddies, I was in the car with him. He was like, hey, look at this guy. And not only for the exotic cars, what it opened my eyes to was what commercial real estate can really offer someone as an investor. And I think another cool thing was realizing how cool and approachable and humble Manny is. Oftentimes we see these social media influencers on Instagram and all these other platforms, and they can seem such larger than life characters. But what's cool about Manny is he's really stuck true to his roots. He was really professional throughout that whole transaction. It was really very cool working with him, even in spite of having those tough conversations. Looking back, is like, man, I went from a guy that knew nothing about it to 7 years later, through all the hard work, dedication, the universe kind of aligning me back, and that being such a big deal. This one of those things I will always hold dear to my heart. Really cool, and I still keep in touch with Manny to this day. He's now, a neighbor here in this market. So again, guys, I'll conclude it with this. I don't want to ever leave life with regrets. Something doesn't happen, that's okay. It's not the end of it. So I'd encourage you guys to just go for it, and go for it often, daily, whenever you can. And I remember that night before I sent Manny that email in the morning about me going back and forth, like, should I do it, should I not? But there was just that part of me that was like, dude, just go for it. And I think oftentimes it's not like we do things or we're afraid to do things. I think the urgency is always within us to go for it, but it's sometimes our mind that will try and talk us out of it. But it's like our body is telling us to go for it. So I'd encourage you guys all in a situation like this where you have nothing really to lose, to just go for it, because you never know what can happen. You can go from thinking about sending an email to ending up closing one of the biggest deals of your life with an idol who helped inspire you to get into whatever you were doing. So guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. We'll be talking about more topics. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Give me some feedback. Don't be afraid to show some love. Hit that like button or subscribe, and more content coming for you guys soon. See you on the next one.